My parents abandoned me at 12 for financial problems, but I found out they were traveling the world with my sister. Now I'm a millionaire, and they came back begging. What I did destroyed them. I'm 24 years old. I work as a financial consultant and run my own nonprofit organization that helps young adults manage their finances. And honestly, I need to tell this story because even now, after everything I've achieved, there are nights when I wake up thinking about that day when I was 12 years old and my parents, Michelle and Brian, sat me down at the kitchen table and told me they couldn't afford to keep me anymore. Just like that. As if I were an expense they could cut, like when you cancel a Netflix subscription or something. I remember my sister Grace, who was like 8 years old at the time, was in her room playing with her dolls, completely oblivious to what was happening, and I just sat there, trying to process the words coming out of my mother's mouth, while my father wouldn't even look me in the eyes. I guess I should start from the beginning. I mean, from before everything went to hell. I grew up in a normal house. You know, nothing special, but not bad either. My father. I worked in sales. I think he sold medical equipment or something like that, and my mother was an administrative assistant at an insurance company. We lived in a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. We had 2 cars. We ate pizza on Fridays, those kinds of things. Grace was born when I was 4, and honestly, she was always the favorite. But I didn't pay much attention to it when I was a kid because, well, she was the baby of the family and everyone adored her. I thought it was normal. Looking back, I should have noticed the signs, like how my parents always made sure Grace had the latest toys while I used the same backpack for 3 years. Or how, when there were money problems, it was always my summer camp that got canceled, never Grace's ballet classes. But the thing is, I was a kid, you know? I didn't think about those things critically. I just lived my life, went to school, played video games with my best friend Kevin, tried to get good grades. I was a good student. Honestly, not a genius, or anything, but I worked hard. I remember in 6th grade I won a science award and my parents came to the ceremony but left before they gave me the certificate because Grace had a dance recital across town. At the time, it hurt, but I convinced myself it was something important for her and that I should be the understanding older brother. God, what an idiot I was. Things started getting weird like 6 months before they abandoned me, though I didn't know it at the time. My parents started having hushed conversations that would stop when I entered the room. There were a lot of phone calls that my father would take outside on the patio. My mother started looking stressed all the time, like with dark circles and constantly biting her nails. Once I heard my father say something about lawyers and having to move soon, but when I asked my mother what was going on, she said it was adult stuff and not to worry. I was 12 years old, basically a kid, so I believed her. And then came that day in March. I don't know the exact date, but it was a Saturday because there was no school. Grace was at a friend's birthday party, and my parents told me we needed to talk. I sat down at the kitchen table with a glass of orange juice, random detail, but I remember it perfectly. And my mother started with this prepared speech about how sometimes families go through difficult times and have to make difficult decisions. My father kept looking at his phone, which seemed strange to me, but I didn't say anything either. And then my mother dropped the bomb. She said, "We've been struggling financially and we can't afford to take care of you the way you deserve, so we've found a wonderful foster family that will take you in temporarily until we can get back on our feet." I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process what I was hearing. I asked her, "What about Grace?" And my mother said Grace would stay with them because she was younger and needed her mom. That part destroyed me. You know what I mean? Because they were basically saying I was expendable, but Grace wasn't. I started crying, which I hate to admit because I was already 12 and wanted to be strong, but the tears just came out. I asked them what I had done wrong, if I could change, if I could get a job or something to help. But my father finally spoke and said, "It's already decided, Benjamin. You're going to the Wilsons next weekend. They're good people and they'll treat you well." A week later, I was packing my life into 2 suitcases, while Grace watched from my bedroom door, asking why I was leaving. What do you tell an 8-year-old girl in that situation? I told her I was going on a kind of adventure and that we'd see each other soon, though I had no idea if that was true. My parents drove me to the Wilsons' house, which was like an hour away, and the ride was the most awkward of my life. My mother tried to make casual conversation, asking me about school and my friends, and I just answered with monosyllables because I was too angry and confused to really talk. The Wilsons, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, it took me like 2 years to start calling them Tom and Linda, were this couple in their 52nds with no children of their own who had been foster parents for years. They lived in a small but cozy house with a decent backyard and a dog named Max. When we arrived, they were kind but not effusive, like they didn't try to pretend everything was perfect or that we were going to be an instant happy family. Mr. Wilson showed me my room, which was small but had everything I needed, and told me, "This is your home now, Benjamin. Take your time adjusting," and then just left me alone. My parents left after like 10 minutes. My mother hugged me and said she'd call me soon. My father gave me a squeeze on the shoulder, and they left. I watched them from my new bedroom window get into their car and drive away, and I remember thinking this all had to be a nightmare, that I was going to wake up in my bed in my real house any moment. But I didn't wake up. This was real. The first few months at the Wilsons' house were weird. They were good to me, gave me my space, but also included me in meals and family activities. They enrolled me in a new school, which was smaller than my previous school, but it was fine. I made some friends. I mean, I wasn't the popular kid or anything, but I wasn't a total outcast either. The Wilsons never tried to replace my parents, which I appreciated, but at the same time they made me feel valued in ways my biological parents never did. Like, Mrs. Wilson went to all my parent-teacher conferences. Mr. Wilson helped me with my math homework, even though he clearly didn't understand modern algebra. Small things that added up. My mother called me like once a month at first, awkward 10-minute conversations, where she'd ask how I was and promise me we'd be together again soon. I always asked her when, and she always said, "Soon? We just need a little more time to get organized." After like 6 months, the calls started spacing out more. Once every 2 months. Then every 3. By the time I turned 13, it had been 4 months since I'd heard from them. And then, when I was 14, I found something that changed everything. I was on the computer at the school library because I had to do a project, and for some reason I decided to Google my parents' names. I don't know why. I guess I was bored or curious. And you know what I found? A travel blog. A damn travel blog called Adventures with the Peterson Family. They used my mother's maiden name, which was Peterson, I guess to have some anonymity. And there they were, my parents and Grace, smiling in photos from beaches in Thailand, markets in Morocco, temples in Japan. There were hundreds of photos. Posts about staying in boutique hotels, dining at fancy restaurants, taking helicopter tours. I sat there staring at the screen, unable to breathe. The blog had started like 3 months after they left me with the Wilsons. 3 months. And there was an introductory post that said, "We decided to sell everything and travel the world with our daughter Grace to give her a global education and experiences she'll remember for a lifetime. We've worked hard for years and can finally make this dream come true. Our daughter, singular. As if I had never existed." I read every post on that blog over the next few weeks, torturing myself with every photo of Grace eating gelato in Italy or playing on some paradise beach. In the posts, my parents talked about the freedom of having no ties, about living minimally, though they clearly weren't living minimally if they were staying in places with infinity pools. They never mentioned me. Not once. It was as if I had been erased from their family history. The worst part was when I looked at the dates and started doing calculations, based on when they started traveling and some details they mentioned about liquidating assets and freeing ourselves from obligations. I realized this wasn't a sudden decision due to financial problems. This had been planned, probably for months before they sat me down at that kitchen table. But they had decided they wanted this travel lifestyle, and I didn't fit into their plans. Simple as that. I was devastated, but also furious. A fury I had never felt before, like the kind that made my hands shake when I thought about them. I told the Wilsons about the blog. By that time, I trusted them more. And Mrs. Wilson went pale, said she was going to contact social services, but Mr. Wilson stopped her and said the only thing we'd accomplish was twisting the knife in the wound more. And honestly, I didn't know. Part of me wanted to confront them, yell at them, let them know I knew the truth. But another part of me, the part that was growing and maturing with the Wilsons, realized that the best revenge would be to succeed without them. So that's what I did. I focused on school like never before. My grades had always been good, but now they were excellent. I participated in every club I could. I joined the debate team, the math club, student council. The Wilsons supported me in everything. Came to every competition, every event, even when they had to drive 2 hours to get there. I started thinking of them as my real family, though I never said it out loud because I felt like it would be betraying my biological parents. You know, it sounds stupid considering what they did to me. But feelings are complicated, you know what I mean? When I was 16, I received a letter. A real physical letter, sent to the Wilsons' house. It was from my father, Brian. In the letter, he basically said they had been traveling and finding themselves, but were now thinking about returning to the United States and settling down again. He said they had missed me and hoped we could reconnect soon. There was a note at the end that said, "By the way, you've been posting about your academic achievements on Facebook. We're very proud of you." That's when I realized they had been monitoring me on social media, probably for years, watching my life from a distance without ever really getting involved. And only now that I was standing out academically, now that I had won some awards and been mentioned in the local paper for winning a state math competition, now they decided they wanted to reconnect. The hypocrisy made me feel sick. I didn't respond to the letter. I blocked my parents on all my social media. He didn't know they were following me until that moment. Apparently, they used fake accounts or something. I told the Wilsons that if my parents tried to contact me again, to tell them I wasn't interested. Mrs. Wilson asked me if I was sure. Said that sometimes families can repair broken relationships, but I was sure. These people had abandoned me, lied to me, erased me from their public life, and only wanted to come back when it was convenient for them. No, thanks. During my senior year of high school, I worked like crazy to get scholarships for college. The Wilsons helped me with everything, from filling out forms to practicing for interviews. Mr. Wilson even helped me put together a portfolio of all my achievements and extracurricular activities. And it worked. I got a full scholarship to a decent state university. It wasn't Harvard or anything, but it covered everything. Tuition, room, board, books, everything. My high school graduation day was one of the best of my life. The Wilsons were there, of course. Front row with a ridiculous banner that said, "Congratulations, Benjamin," in huge letters. It embarrassed me, but I also loved it. My best friend Kevin was there with his family. Some of my favorite teachers came to congratulate me after the ceremony. And then, just as we were leaving the auditorium, I saw them. Michelle, Brian, and Grace. Grace was like 14 at the time, and honestly, I almost didn't recognize her. She was taller, more mature, and looked at me with this expression I couldn't decipher. My mother approached with her arms outstretched as if to hug me, saying, "Benjamin, we're so proud of you. We wanted to be here for your big day." My father was smiling, like that fake smile you put on for photos, and I just froze. I couldn't believe they had the audacity to show up after 4 years of almost complete silence. Mrs. Wilson positioned herself next to me, like protective, and asked, "Who are you people?" My mother seemed offended by the question. "We're his parents, obviously," she said, "and we've come to celebrate with our son." But before she could say anything more, Grace spoke. She said, "Benjamin, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were coming. Mom and Dad said they just wanted to surprise you. I didn't. And she stopped, looking at me with tears in her eyes. That surprised me. Grace obviously knew something about the situation. Probably not everything, because she was young, when they left me, but enough to feel guilty or uncomfortable. I told her, "It's okay, Grace. It's not your fault." And then I looked at my parents and said as calmly as I could, "Thanks for coming, but you're really not welcome here. Please leave." My father turned red and tried to argue, saying he had paid for my education for years, which was literally a lie. The Wilsons and the state had covered everything after they placed me in foster care, and that he had a right to be there. Mr. Wilson, who was generally the calmer of the two, stepped forward, and said in this tone that brooked no argument, "The young man has asked you to leave, so I suggest you respect his wishes." There was a tense moment where I thought my father was going to make a scene, but finally they turned around and left. Grace looked at me one more time before leaving, and I swear I saw an apology in her eyes. After that, I tried to forget about them again and focus on college. Amazing. Total freedom, new experiences, interesting people from all over the country. I majored in finance because, ironically, the whole experience with my parents and their supposed financial crisis, which I now knew was a lie, had made me obsessed with money, how it works, how people manage it or mismanage it, how it can be used as an excuse or weapon. During my freshman year of college, my parents tried to contact me several more times via email. The messages followed the same pattern: superficial apologies, attempts to explain their behavior, requests that we at least talk. I ignored them all. But then, in my sophomore year, I received a different email. It was from Grace. She was 16 at the time and wrote me this long, emotional letter where she basically told me she had discovered the truth about why they had left me. Turns out Grace, curious and probably feeling guilty after the encounter at my graduation, had found some old documents in the attic of the house where my parents had finally settled. They had returned to the United States like 2 years earlier. Apparently their travel adventure had ended when they ran out of money. Among those documents were tax returns, notices from debt collectors, and something that made me see everything in a completely new light: a court order requiring my father to pay a huge fine for fraud at his previous job. Basically, my father had been embezzling funds from his company for years. Small amounts that added up to large figures over time. They caught him just before I turned 12. Instead of going to prison, he reached a settlement that required him to pay restitution. So he and my mother, facing this debt and probably embarrassed that their community would find out, decided to flee, literally. They sold the house, liquidated everything they could, left me one less mouth to feed, more freedom of movement, and went abroad where debt collectors couldn't reach them easily. Grace attached photos of some of these documents to her email. She also wrote, "I can't believe they did this to you, Benjamin. It's so unfair. If I had known at the time, I don't know what I would have done, but something. And now that I know the truth, I can't look at them the same way. I feel like my whole childhood was a lie. The perfect blog photos, the trips, everything was built on abandoning you." I'm not going to lie, I cried when I read that email. Not tears of sadness exactly, but of validation. All my life I had thought maybe there was something wrong with me. Something that made me the disposable son, while Grace was the golden one. But it had nothing to do with me. I was just bigger, more expensive, harder to take on their flight from responsibility. Grace had been small enough to drag along without her asking questions. Grace, and I started communicating regularly after that. Turns out she was an amazing girl, smart and compassionate, and she hated what our parents had done to me. She told me they talked about me occasionally, always in terms of how I had chosen to cut contact with them, as if I were the one who had abandoned the family. The gaslighting was insane. Grace said she tried to defend me, but they just didn't want to hear any version of the story that made them look bad. During my junior year of college, I started volunteering with a nonprofit organization that taught financial literacy to at-risk teenagers, many of them in foster homes or from low-income families. It was incredibly rewarding to help these young people understand basic things like budgets, bank accounts, credit, all the things no one had taught them. I realized this was what I wanted to do with my life, not just make money for myself, but help others take control of their finances so they would never be victims of situations like mine. I graduated with honors, and again the Wilsons were there to celebrate with me. This time Grace also came. Without my parents, she asked me beforehand if she could come, and I told her, of course. She wasn't to blame for anything. It was a perfect day. After the ceremony, we all went to dinner, the Wilsons, Grace, Kevin and his girlfriend, and some of my college friends. Someone made a toast saying I had overcome impossible circumstances to get here, and everyone raised their glasses, and in that moment I felt genuinely loved and supported. I didn't need Michelle and Brian. I had my own family, one I had chosen, and that had chosen me back. But of course, the universe couldn't leave me alone. like 2 months after graduating. While I was looking for jobs and starting to develop my idea for a nonprofit organization, I received another email from my father. This one was different from the previous ones. There were no pretenses of wanting to reconnect or fix our relationship. It was straight to the point. It basically said that he and my mother had fallen on hard times. Their travel blog had failed, it no longer generated income from. They had exhausted their savings, were facing eviction from their rental apartment, and needed financial help. And since I was their son, and apparently now had a college degree and good prospects, it was my responsibility to help them. My responsibility. The words burned me. These two adults who had abandoned me when I was a defenseless child now believed I owed them something. I responded for the first time in years, and my response was brief. I don't owe you anything. Don't contact me again. I thought that would be the end. But I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, the emails intensified. First from my mother. Emotional pleas about how it was my family obligation, how they had raised me for 12 years and that meant something. Then from my father, more aggressive messages about how I was an ungrateful son, how they were in this situation because of me, which made absolutely no sense. But there he was, saying it. They started contacting people in my professional network on LinkedIn, saying I had abandoned them in their time of need. They even threatened to take me to court for some elderly parent support obligation, though they weren't elderly. They were like 53 and 51 respectively, perfectly capable of working. I had to get a lawyer. The Wilsons helped me find a good one who specialized in family law. The lawyer reviewed everything, the foster care documents, my parents' emails, everything, and assured me I had no legal obligation to them. In fact, my lawyer sent them a cease and desist letter that basically said if they continued harassing me, they would face legal consequences that stopped them for a while. But the damage to my peace of mind was already done. I started having trouble sleeping. Anxiety every time my phone rang or a new email arrived. The Wilsons suggested I talk to a therapist, and I finally agreed. Therapy helped a lot. It helped me process not just the initial abandonment, but also all the accumulated trauma from years of being ignored and then harassed by the very people who were supposed to care for me. Despite all the drama, I moved forward with my life. I got a decent job as a financial analyst at an investment firm. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid well and gave me the stability and experience I needed. I kept working on my nonprofit idea in my spare time, developing a curriculum, getting some mentors who believed in the vision, applying for grants and seed funding. And then, when I was 22, something unexpected happened. A journalist who had been investigating financial fraud stumbled upon my father's story. The fraud from years ago, the flight abroad, everything. And during his investigation, he found my story too. He contacted me and asked if I would be willing to talk about how my father's crime had affected his family. At first, I said no. I didn't want to relive all that publicly. But the journalist explained he was making a documentary about the long-term consequences of financial crime on families, and that my story could help other children in similar situations. I talked to the Wilsons, to Grace, to my therapist. Everyone said it was my decision, but that it could be cathartic and potentially helpful to others. So I agreed. I did several interviews, shared documents, with names redacted when necessary, told my story with all its painful details. The documentary premiered like a year later, when I was 23. It was called something like Hidden Debts, Broken Families, and covered several stories, but mine was one of the central ones. The response was overwhelming. Suddenly, people from all over the country were contacting me, some sharing similar stories, others offering support or resources. Some nonprofit organizations contacted me wanting to collaborate. And most importantly, I got the attention and funding I needed to finally launch my organization, which I called Future Foundation. Yes, generic name, but it conveyed the message. We started small, me and 2 volunteers, teaching financial literacy workshops at community centers and schools. My parents, of course, saw the documentary. Grace told me they were furious, that I had ruined their reputation publicly and had exaggerated everything for attention. The irony of them accusing me of seeking attention when they had spent years documenting their perfect lives on a public blog didn't occur to them, apparently. They tried to sue me for defamation, but their case was immediately dismissed because everything I had said in the documentary was backed by documents and verifiable truth. Like 6 months ago, I received a message from Grace telling me our father had had a minor heart attack. Not fatal, but serious. She asked if I wanted to know, if I wanted to visit him. I told her honestly that I hoped he recovered, but no, I didn't want to visit him or have contact again. I felt nothing when I found out. Not relief or sadness or satisfaction, just a kind of neutral emptiness. These people are strangers to me now. Strangers who share my DNA, but nothing else. Last month, I bought my first house. It's small, 2 bedrooms in a quiet neighborhood, but it's mine. The Wilsons came to help me move. Grace drove 6 hours to be there too. Kevin and some friends from work came with pizza and beer. We spent all day unpacking boxes and hanging pictures and assembling IKEA furniture that came with confusing instructions. "Mrs. Wilson," cried, when I hung a framed photo of the 4 of us, her, Mr. Wilson, Grace, and me, that we had taken at my college graduation. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the floor of my new living room because I still didn't have a couch, drinking a beer and looking around. And I thought about that one 2-year-old boy who was left at stranger's house with 2 suitcases and a broken heart. I thought about how far I'd come, not just in terms of education and career, but emotionally. I had built a life that had meaning and purpose. I had found a real family in the family, Wilsons. I had recovered a relationship with Grace that was genuine and based on mutual respect. I had friends who valued me. I had a job I loved that helped others. Does it still hurt to think about Michelle and Brian? Sometimes, I'm not going to lie. There are moments, usually late at night when I can't sleep, where I wonder what would have happened if they had made a different choice, if they had kept me, if we had been a real family. But those moments are increasingly rare and increasingly brief, because at the end of the day, their abandonment, though devastating at the time, forced me to be strong, to be independent, to build something for myself. I'm not grateful to them. Let that be clear. No one should have to go through what I went through. But I survived. More than survive, I flourished. Future Foundation is growing. We've already helped more than 500 young people in 3 different cities. We're applying for bigger grants that would allow us to expand nationally. I have an incredible team of passionate people who really care about making a difference. And every time I see a young person understand for the first time how compound interest works, or how to make a budget, or how to avoid the debt traps that catch so many people, I think that maybe my whole horrible experience had a purpose after all. Grace comes to visit me every 2 months or so. She's in her senior year of high school now, applying to colleges, and asks me for advice about everything. She tells me she wants to study social work, that she wants to help children in difficult situations. And I know she's going to be amazing at it because she understands, really understands, what it's like to feel trapped in a complicated family situation. Sometimes we talk about our parents, but less and less. They're living somewhere in the Midwest now, working regular jobs that barely cover their expenses, according to Grace. Part of me, a very small part, feels a little sorry for them. But most of me just feels nothing. They've made their bed. Now they have to lie in it. The Wilsons told me last week they're proud of me. And Mr. Wilson, who's generally not emotional, told me something that stuck with me. He said, "Some people let their circumstances define them, Benjamin. But you let your circumstances refine you. And that's what makes you extraordinary." I don't know if I'm extraordinary. Honestly, I still feel like that scared kid most days. Only now that kid has a college degree and a mortgage, but I'm trying. Every day, I wake up and try to be better than the day before, to help more people, to build something meaningful with the life I was given, despite everything. And I guess that's enough for now.